Thank you very much. It is now time for questions to the Minister, and I recognize a member from Oshawa.
Thank you, Speaker, and I do have questions for the Minister of the Environment, Conservation and Parks. I will admit, though, it's distressing to know that in the province of Ontario, the Minister of Conservation and the Environment stands in this place, and I would argue is arguing for the damage to the environment, at least as we have learned from organizations like the Canadian Environmental Law Association has put together a preliminary breakdown of the bill. We have, especially Schedule 6, we have major recommendations from folks that this government pull this schedule because of the damage. They've outlined it, and I would like to know from this minister what he has to say to people like the Canadian Environmental Law Association when they challenge this government and say that this is regressive, that this is unnecessary, that this is doing harm, that this is not protecting Ontarians.
Thank you very much. I'll turn it back over now to the Minister of the Environment, Conservation and Parks.
Well, thanks very much, Mr. Speaker. Thanks very much for that question. And to the member opposite, I've heard a few comments from this side, the other side of the House, saying that this is a bad bill, but I've yet to hear one item of criticism of what we're doing. What we're doing, Mr. Speaker, is taking an act which is 50 years old. Mr. Speaker, there's certain members of our legislature who weren't even born when this act came out. Pierre Elliott Trudeau was the Prime Minister of Canada when this act came out, Mr. Speaker. The world has changed. So has our knowledge of the environment. So has our knowledge of building infrastructure projects. So the question of the member opposite, what exactly do you have wrong with this piece of legislation, Mr. Speaker? Because what it does, it aligns our legislation with the federal government and other provinces. It gets us up to date and modernizes the Act. What do you have wrong with this bill specifically?
Thank you. Further questions, a member from Oshawa.
Thank you. And further to our conversation, I do have some specifics, and I'm so excited to share. And I have a 10-page document with a preliminary analysis of Schedule 6 that I'm happy to send over to the minister. But specifically, as outlined by the Canadian Environmental Law Association, that Schedule 6 removes the automatic application of the environmental assessment process to public sector undertakings, and instead the provincial cabinet will have unfettered discretion to pass a new regulation that lists which projects are or are not subject to the Act, rename individual EAs as comprehensive EAs, but the environment minister will still be empowered to approve EA terms of reference that exclude or scope key environmental planning matters from consideration in the EA process, terminate the 10 currently approved Class EAs and replace them with as yet unknown streamlined regulatory requirements, editorial steamroll, and significantly restrict the grounds upon which Ontarians can request bump up or elevation of contentious infrastructure projects from a streamlined EA to a comprehensive EA. You have 20 years of recommendation from stakeholders you could have drawn from to make this a better process. So just scrapping it, please justify. That's my question.
Thank you. Back to the minister for your response.
Thanks very much, Mr. Speaker. And what the member said opposite is completely, utterly false. Mr. Speaker, I know they have not been in.
I would ask you to withdraw, please.
I understand the member opposite, their party has not been in power for 20 years, but understanding how regulations get built in this legislation, the cabinet does not have the power to go project by project. What we're going to do, Mr. Speaker, if this legislation is passed, we are going to go through the consultation process with municipalities, with stakeholders, Indigenous communities. We are going to post those consultations with proposed regulations. Those regulations are going to be consulted on the EBR and brought back for changes. And as every other piece of legislation that gets passed in this legislature, as it has through the entire history of this legislature, those regulations go to Cabinet for final approval. What she is saying is obtuse, Mr. Speaker. It is totally inappropriate to be spreading those types of questions to this legislature because it's untrue.
I will sit down, please. I will ask the minister to withdraw once again.
Withdraw.
Thank you very much. You still have a point of order, or did we take care of that for you? All right. Thank you. Further questions? Further questions? I recognize the member from point of order.
I stood on a legitimate point of order. I appreciate that the member was asked to withdraw, but I'm not going to be disrespected in this space. My point of order was that I have the right to not be treated that way in this House or called a liar. Twice. Twice.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Further questions? Back to the member from Oshawa.
Thank you, Speaker. And I would like to make it clear to Hansard and the folks at home that the words that I have shared are directly pulled, and I am citing and quoting from the Canadian Environmental Law Association. This particular piece was written by their counsel, Richard Lindgren, called EA's Not Red Tape, the case against Ontario Bill 197. So I read directly from their submission. So if there's any untruth or any correction, take it up with them, perhaps. Teresa McClanahan, CELA's Executive Director Council, says, for the most part, the proposed changes serve to speed up development at the expense of environmental protection and public participation rights. So is she also incorrect, Minister?
Thank you. Back to the minister for a final response.
There will be proper consultation with the public through the entire process as it's vetted out through the creation of the regulations in this legislation, and I look forward for the members' opposite support in this legislation as we move to make Ontario's environmental assessment modernized.